Koby is a very unique character in how he fits within the story of One Piece. And that he's someone who's introduced very early on, yet we still keep getting consistent updates from him from time to time. And that's happened again very recently and as of writing with his appearance in chapter 1121 and declaration in chapter 1122. And with that, there's been copious amounts of discussion and propaganda arisen from all of it, but a big talking point / question I feel like has become quite prevalent over the past couple of weeks that I'd like to discuss today is Koby a Conqueror? No. And I hate that. So join me as I explain to you why I believe both of those things in today's video, and join me as well by hitting the sub button if you happen to enjoy the show. So let's get into it. Now I want you to pay attention to how I phrased the question. I asked, is Koby a Conqueror, and not will he be a Conqueror? You might say, okay, then what's the difference? To answer the question of whether Koby has Conqueror's Haki or not, we first have to ask, how does one even get to become a Supreme King? And from the way I phrased it, there is no becoming one. You either are or you're not. In other words, you must be born with it. The Kuja called him the 1 in a million, Rayleigh says this ability cannot be learned, and Garp just outright says you have to be born with it. We can see plenty of evidence of that as well from Conqueror's Haki users as kids, from being able to use it unknowingly in extremely tense situations, to stating their wildest ambitions and dreams out in the open with complete sincerity. Now on the other hand, we have Koby, introduced to us at the beginning of Luffy's journey, working for Iron Mace Alvida against his will after being captured. And being captured in and of itself doesn't mean that he's not a conqueror or anything. Working for Alvida also doesn't necessarily mean he's not a conqueror, but it might just be the fact that he abandoned his route of escape in the dinghy that he was building for 2 years, and therefore never being able to achieve his dream of joining the Navy. There's no debate here. No Conqueror would ever do that, and that's enough for me to say that Koby isn't one. Simple as, really. He goes on to, of course, gradually get the courage to be able to say what he really thinks and do what he really wants to do, but all thanks to Luffy and Zoro. In his own words, they taught him to fight for what he believes in. Conquerors, however, do not learn how to fight what they believe in, they just do. And in this case, even teach. Let me also remind you of the words from another Conqueror after hearing Luffy's usual, I'm getting the One Piece declaration. Those who don't have the guts to say it will die first. I think it was in Enya's lobby that Koby finally says his true dream of wanting to be an admiral. And even then, he's just about got the heart to say that out loud. And it's once again Luffy that tells him to keep his head up. And unlike Luffy in Sabaody Archipelago, this Koby just doesn't have the guts to state his dream out loud while being absolutely and completely serious. That is the difference that I'm trying to point out here. I imagine if Koby really was a conqueror, that this would be the dream he'd have when he was introduced, rather than the pretty low goal of just wanting to join the Navy. At the end of the day, there's just something very distinct between how all these conquerors operate versus how Koby operates. That is what I'd like to get across. And that should be this section over. But it's not. We still have to put our findings in the context of the current day. So that's what we'll do. But before that, honesty impact is not a case of Conqueror's infusion. I don't know where people get that idea from, but at most it's internal destruction, and at worst it's just a shockwave akin to Zoro's Phoenix Pound cannons. There's no zap or z prefix like with Garp, which Oda as of recent has been using to indicate advanced Conqueror's Haki. So quite clearly not a case of that, just something I'd like to get out of the way. And if you ask me personally, I think it's a case of just Haki emission. That is all. Now, Luffy, I have to stop your dream from being realized. Those are big words coming from the captain, and it's the last thing he leaves us with for now. But is there enough to get a Conqueror's Haki user out of it? The main aspect of Conqueror's Haki is the ability to control your willpower and use it to dominate the will of others who aren't even worth fighting. If what he's saying is what he really thinks, you could supposedly argue that he's gained that aspect of Conquerors. Though I would tell you, every Navy officer implicitly wants to stop pirates from achieving the One Piece, and that doesn't mean they have Conqueror's Haki. The argument I just presented would also mean that the very nature of Conquerors would have to be changed, in that you could gain it later on in life, which is not implied at all. In fact, it's the complete opposite, like I said before. Even though Rocinante and Doflamingo had the same upbringing, one of them is clearly just a different caliber from the other. Case in point. And even with a late bloomer in someone like Zoro, I don't think I have to state every difference between the kid version of him versus the kid version of Koby for you to realize that there's clearly a difference between them. The only kingly quality I can think of for Koby would be his really self-sacrificing nature to help others, which you could translate to a king's duty to save his people maybe, but I'm not sure if throwing your life away for others would even count. Something like that is extremely selfless, when Conqueror's Haki is more associated with those that have a massive sense of self. Koby just does not have it. And that makes sense. I personally find his narrative role not to be the 1 in a million, but rather the strongest of the other 999,999, who definitely weren't blessed by any means as an exceptional fighter, but get to an exceptional level by working harder than everyone else. I mentioned earlier the fact that Conqueror's Haki is, at the very least, very heavily implied to be something you need to be born with in order for you to be a user of. And that's the very same reason why I don't peg Koby to be one, but I'll be honest, I really don't like that. It might sound a bit dramatic, but it does very slightly just go against the ethos of One Piece for me. I understand the idea that some people are just born differently, but I think that concept doesn't really suit One Piece. And I want to look at specifically Sabo's flashback when discussing this. The notion of having to be born with conquerors, instead of it being something maybe anyone can achieve if you have the correct mentality, sounds awfully similar to the rhetoric that was being spewed by the aristocrats of the Goa Kingdom as they set Great Terminal alight, that the people there should have just been born of noble blood. You can call it a reach, but that's honestly what it sounds like to me. One of the messages from this little arc, and throughout One Piece really, is that people aren't born to think a certain way, but their thought process is the product of their environment. And when that environment changes through maybe new characters coming into their life to change their perspective, or close friends dying, or anything really to shape a person to have king-like qualities, I feel like that change should be reflected into that person becoming a user of the Supreme King Haki, rather than what One Piece implies, which is the fact that being born with conquerors shapes your actions and the way you think in a certain way. And don't even get me started on the fact that Conqueror's Haki might be able to be passed on to your children, because that is the most whack thing I've ever heard. Oh my, no. We cannot let Haki nepotism be real, please. Please, because that is just whack, man. Don't let that be a thing. On a serious note, that's just the complete antithesis of what I'd like Conqueror's Haki to be in One Piece. That is straight up just, you should have been born with noble blood, but replace noble blood with conquerors. You can only be king if you are born in this certain way. That's what I hate. Hate that. But as we approach the long-awaited Elbaf arc, let me put it out there as well that Usopp will not get Conqueror's Haki if our current understanding of conquerors is correct for the reasons above. I will say though, with Joy Boy's recent application of conquerors, I'd say there might be a few things about Haki in general that we still don't know and might yet be explored in the future. And in addition to that, our first proper explanation on conquerors in Rayleigh doesn't actually say that you must be born with it, which could end up with Supreme Kings in Koby and Usopp in the future. But don't count on it though. In conclusion, Koby isn't a conqueror because he simply isn't built like that. Conqueror's Haki could have been the power up to signify the completion of his character arc, and the power that maybe makes him an admiral, but I guess not. But I suppose we'll just have to see what Oda has in store for him. But that's all from me today. If you disagree with anything I said, please feel free to comment down below. If you liked it, like the video, but subscribe before you do. That's all from me. Have a good day. Bye bye.